I welcome Ben Rockwood for this podcast. This is a kind of a podcast where I'm deeply honored to do with them because it's not about like DevOps as being the complex piece of a puzzle which can be unsolved, but these people have really given a new dimension to it. Not just he. There are amazing scientists in the DevOps like Gene Kim and who not. And I'm a greatest fan of the philosophy behind the DevOps because it's not about being more complex in your jargons, but it's all about bringing the meaningful insights to your organization as well. So I'm deeply honored to have Ben Rockwood on my podcast, and trust me, don't miss this podcast because this is going to change the way you think about the DevOps as well. So thank you so much, sir, for giving me this podcast. It means a lot to me.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, in John Willis' podcast, I asked him why nobody is coming up with a unique solution which is uniform throughout the industry, but he gave an answer which is as a curse and the blessing of the DevOps. But I want to understand like how are we understanding the DevOps culture on a scale of 1 to 10? How do you rate the understanding that we have today as an Homo sapiens in understanding what is the DevOps culture all about? Because you give a different twist to every talk, and you are an sysadmin, and you are not a DevOps guy any from the beginning of your career, like almost of what you have been doing. So I just want to know how are we really defining a DevOps culture in an organization, according to you?
That's a difficult one. The DevOps culture is the future. It's the future. One of the things I've tried to really emphasize, I mean, I was looking when I started managing teams, I was trying to figure out how to build a team that could work well, that could build a world-class infrastructure, and was really grappling with like, what is the definition? Like, how do we know when we've achieved it, right? And there's some things you don't, forget DevOps, forget everything you've ever heard. Just think about it like, just like a regular human being, right? Like any endeavor that you're going to go and do, you're thinking about how can I build a business, right? At the end of the day, we're talking about businesses and organizations, right? How do we accomplish our mission, our goal, with the least amount of effort, with the highest amount of precision, in a place where people can have pride of workmanship, people can enjoy what they do, they can do that job well, and the mission can just be filled, right? Like fundamentally, that's it, right? Like, I mean, if your gig is making shoes, how do I go about making the best shoes at the least cost, in the most timely way possible, so that I can feel great about making the world a better place by making shoes, right? Doesn't matter what you're doing. That's fundamentally what we're about. And, a new industry was born in the late 90s, around the turn of the millennium, right? Where now there were these online services, and a bunch of people came together to build these online services. And let's be honest, like the industry is really, really young. Like we don't really know what we're doing. Most of us who have entered the industry did so because we were hobbyists, right? A lot of us were kids who liked computers, who liked electronics, and we started playing with them. And then like one day somebody was like, "Hey kid, I'll give you a job." And you were like, "You'll pay me to do it?" Yes, I will do that, right? We didn't have business degrees. We didn't know how to run organizations. We didn't know what culture was, except like, like geek culture or like Trekkie culture or Star Wars culture or whatever. Like, I mean, we weren't thinking these big grand thoughts. We were just thinking like we wanted to play with a lot of technology, right? And so we started doing that, and we started building cool things, and those things got bigger and bigger and bigger, and some of them sort of fell over. And in the early 2000s, we built some big things, and then they fell over, and we had some old stuff we were trying to drag with us. Big mid-range computers and stuff was my jam. I loved the really big $1 million Sun computers. That was my thing. I loved those, but it wasn't working, right? And so a number of changes came along, right? And cloud came about. Like I was glad to be a part of that with Joint, with the first infrastructure as a service cloud, right? And now we had infrastructure that could come and go, and you didn't own it, somebody else owned it. And okay, now I can build things without having to like think about, I'm going to buy something and I'm going to have to use it for 3 years and I'm going to throw it away. And like, I've got to build this infrastructure like that. I mean, most people, like, we think of Facebook as the center of social media, but before that, there was MySpace. MySpace was like the thing. And MySpace was built on that old era of like, buy a bunch of stuff, run it, and, you know, throw it away. It was trying to build based on SANs and stuff like that. It was very sort of technology focused and kind of like died under its own weight. So we needed this whole new way of approaching things. And there were all these things that needed to happen in order for us as an industry to mature, right? Some of that was we needed new tools. The old tools that we're using before, big servers, complicated operating systems, proprietary software, antiquated operating or languages and operating systems, all this stuff that was owned by a corporation, right? It used to be like IBM or Sun or HP or Microsoft, like owned all that, right? And it slowed us down because we were all tied to them. We could only do what they let us do. You know, suddenly we're getting open systems, right? With Linux, we can do whatever we want to do with it. Anybody can do whatever they want to it. We can put it back. We can all share it. Right now, we're going faster. We give up on big computers and we just go with open, right? Just your regular old x86 rack mount servers. Let's just get those. We can get them from anyone. We can do whatever we want with them. They're getting better and better and better, right? All of a sudden, we don't need IBM. We don't need Sun. Then we got to a point, we don't even need Dell, right? We can go with whoever we want to. If you don't serve me today, I'll go with somebody else. Okay, so we got better there. Programming languages, you know, Java, you're in the Sun ecosystem and you're in the IBM ecosystem and you're beholden to, if you're .NET, you're beholden to Microsoft. Well, okay, we get rid of that. Now we've got open languages, right? We can write in these languages that everyone can use and we don't owe anybody. And we move at the speed of all of us and what we need. All right, we're getting better tools. Well, at the same time, right, like, how do we work together, right? A bunch of people hanging out, making cool stuff works when you're like a handful of people, right? And we now codify that as the 2-pizza team, right? When you've got like 10 or so people, you can all jam, you can just do stuff. But when you get bigger than that, oh boy, now you need like coordination, right? Now you need a way to have multiple people run multiple teams and interact in a way that continues to build something cohesive so that we're not falling apart. At the same time, like, we need to have sort of enough of a framework that we can all work together, but not so much that we can't move, right? In other words, the same sort of thing we saw where we needed to break away from the control of the big companies. We kind of needed to break away from this sort of like heavy bureaucracy that limited what we could do, right? And if you think about it, that's still not done. There are some places where that's done, but there's still plenty of places in the industry that still have this kind of command and control structure, deeply compartmentalized. If you look at DevOps, a lot of it, you know, is really happening in pockets of teams. It's not like entire companies have done. What we started to see is companies opening up to the idea of agile and getting into the business literature as being something beyond just, you know, a tech thing or DevOps or whatever. We're seeing them apply this idea of agile, not necessarily in like the agile manifesto sense, but just being able to change and morph, because that's the way the world works now. It changes quickly, to becoming more agile and adopting these things. So we're sort of seeing the bottom got it first and the top starting to get it. It's starting to come together, but it's still a very awkward transition. And so all this to say, you know, we're still a really, really young industry that's coming together and maturing. And what's great is that we can look back at other industries in the industrialized era that had these same problems, right? One of the reasons I talk a lot about history is because it can be a little confusing about like, where are we and where are we going? Well, you can kind of look back at the past and see some things that look really similar to where we're at. We can see where they went, and we can get a sense of where things are going in the future and maybe jump faster, because we know that what we're doing right now is way faster than we had in the past. And when you look at manufacturing looks a lot like what we did. And a lot of people don't think that, because they think, you know, big machines and people just, you know, some guys just stand there, stamp, 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 you know, it's doing one job all day long. Oh, it's the worst, right? But if you, I mean, that's true for like, you know, a factory, but that's the end result, right? If you go back, you know, when cars were first created, like they were made in universities, right? It was like smart kids, right? People come together, hobbyists, like they were building these things, right? They were like trying to figure out how to put a steam engine together, and then they figured out about combustion engines. And if you read the story of like Henry Ford, he was just tinkering. He actually went and got a job working for the Edison company for a little while. He didn't go there because like he wanted to make a lot of money or because he wanted to go like be a genius with Edison. He was working on building his own little car, but he didn't understand electricity. And so he just decided to go get a job with Edison and work for the power company for a while. So you're going to learn enough about electricity, come back and actually build, you know, the electronics you need for a combustion engine. And once he kind of learned enough, he went back and like, you know how to do that. And he was industrious, right? There were tons and tons and tons of these little car companies everywhere, but each car was bespoke, right? Every single one was a little different. It was just for them. And the problem is if, you know, if you wanted to buy one of these cars, you had to wait for them to build it for you. And because it was all custom, if anything happened to it, like it was up to them to fix it, you know? And if they went out of business, you were toast. You know, you think about like a lot of the electric cars today actually do the same sort of thing of like you sort of feel okay buying a Tesla because Tesla's big enough that Tesla's probably going to be around for a while. But we've seen plenty of other car companies come along, electric car companies come along that, you know, hey, we have the new car, but you're like, you might be out of business in like a year. And I don't want to go buy your $60,000 electric vehicle. And all of a sudden I'm stuck with this thing because like you go out of business, and you can't help me. So, you know, that feels a lot like a lot of our businesses today. We're sort of, people are doing the best they can to automate everything, but every company looks a little different. They're all bespoke, you know. And you see the audio industry over time, it culled down and there were some standards that came around. And to be honest, it kind of got boring, right? Like it became repeatable. And we saw a number of things come that sort of made it much more stringent. And it got kind of to the point where, you know, at some point they didn't have the technology to have a machine, you know, stamp a part out all day long. So you had some guy standing there stamping it all day long. Now, of course, we've replaced a lot of that with robotics. So you need fewer people to do a horrible, tedious job of this. But like, we're kind of going through that same cycle. Like there are a lot of companies where you have some poor guy who's just doing like the stupid job all day long, right? This old sysadmin joke, like, you know, go away or I'll replace you with a very small shell script. You know, I mean, there's some things where it's just a matter of time before it gets automated and nobody has to do that horrible job. In the meantime, like somebody's still got to do it. So anyway, there's a lot of parallels. And so like, you know, in the end, like where are we going? Like we're going to a more mature form of the industry where we focus on building services and less on how we build the infrastructure to build services. In the same way that there are still people who focus on, plant automation and building robots for automation, but that's a small number of people. Like the majority of people in an auto factory now are worried about building a car. And when we look at an auto company, we don't care about all the automation they're using in their factory. It's neat, but we don't really care about that. We care about the actual vehicle they're making, right? And so I think that's where we're going, right? Kind of a brave new mature world, and it's a big question as to when we get there. I thought it would be somewhere around 2030, but I don't know, we're not moving maybe as fast as I thought. So maybe it's 2040, 2050, which is kind of sad. At some point our job is just going to get super boring, right? It'll be super boring and we won't all get paid like gobs and gobs and gobs of money, and it will just be routine. But for now, it's young and exciting.
That's true. Because in one of your talks, Gene Kim actually referred to this. Annual business planning sessions can be maddening. They think IT operations is all they can eat buffet. It's all about your definition, which just goes back to it's all about the people, process, and the tools that we are doing today. But sometimes, I feel that sometimes a company just overhypes a thing. Like Kubernetes is Kubernetes. It's not a big piece of a machine that you are just installing it. there's cloud managed clusters and whatnot. But I wanted to understand, like, why are we making it more complex in understanding the insights of it instead of building it as it is? Because sometimes CI/CD pipelines, I've seen many companies who have told, like, you know what, we took 2 months to write a CI/CD pipeline for this and that. But like, I am not seeing the transformation, and I don't see that that's the ultimate goal for any organization. So I want to understand, like, what is that system thinking all about, and how should we pave a way in transforming an organization's procedures, and does not that does not affect any principles of an organization. How can we cater to the needs of an organization which is trying to automate everything through DevOps?
Yeah, there's a really good book, which I have over here somewhere. Yeah, the Topology of Teams, that I think talks about this really well. So one of the mistakes I think that we made early on in DevOps is we want, a lot of us, we care about it, right? And the thing is we want to do everything. But the reality is there's just too much out there, right? Like you said, like why does it take 2 months to like write, to adopt a CI/CD pipeline? Well, it takes a long time for everyone to get trained. It takes a long time for them to evaluate all the options that are out there. It takes a long time for them to play around with it until they feel like they have a handle on it. Then they go ahead and start taking some of their internal projects and trying to switch them over and get them to work. And it takes a little while. They get it right, they get it wrong. And then along the way, they find all these other things they can do, right? So they're improving that. And it's really hard to do that with a collection of people too, right? If you have more than like, say, 3-4 people working on this, it can be really challenging, because if you have more than 4 people, then you can be guaranteed that's not all they're doing. They're probably doing something else at the same time. So it takes a long time, right? And any of these technologies are really challenging, right? Like Kubernetes is the thing that everyone should be using all the time, right? You mentioned. Okay, everyone talks about Kubernetes, but how many people actually understand Kubernetes really well? Not many, like not many. A handful do, who just went super deep into the technology and they're obsessed with it. And those people are kind of annoying, because like all they care about is Kubernetes, right? Like you can tell when you're around them. They're just like, I want to make French fries for dinner. Well, Kubernetes has an operator that can make French fries, right? Like just any stupid problem you can imagine, Kubernetes solves that problem. And you're just like, you're super annoying to be around. Also, I need you because I don't know Kubernetes very well and you do. So there is a place, and I think the book team Topologies talked about this, kind of made a good case that like sometimes we want to just create these sort of DevOps organizations or SRE organizations and they just sort of do it all. But there is a case for having subject matter experts in specific teams that enable your organization, right? Take a couple of people, put them over there and let them just focus on that solution set and get really, really good at it so that they can help everyone else. So if you're trying to teach everyone in your organization how to use Kubernetes, like it's never going to work, right? Everyone learns at different speeds and it's just not going to work. Take a couple of people, put them aside, get them trained, give them resources, give them whatever they need, let them go off and just become subject matter experts of that. And then whenever your organization needs to use that, they can go and help you do that, right? They can take that burden off. But yeah, so I think that's one of the ways that you enable an organization, is just that you sort of build a team structure that allows for sort of subject matter experts to arise and to become experts in these things so that you can grow.
Yeah, but I always wanted to understand, like, how much of DevOps is a discovery and how much is destination, because nobody knows what it's it. Because I've seen your talks and it talks about that, because most of the time we have to know which tool to be using. It's not just Ansible, Puppet, Chef, or else, of course, that's your previous institution which you came from. And I think Adam Jacob has his own definition of DevOps and whatnot. So I just want to understand, like, how much is DevOps and discovery and how much is destination?
It's all discovery. It's not destination. There is no destination. The destination is the future. There will always be improvement. And this goes back to sort of the Japanese ideas in Lean, right? Is continuous improvement. You can always get better. And that's the mindset that you have to have. If you're trying to go for a destination, then you're going to have goals. So then the question is, well, if my destination is out there, what are those goals? Is it that I'm going to adopt a technology because that technology is going to be obsolete, right? You know, I mean, I was the expert in Solaris. There's nobody in the world that was better at Solaris than me. Does it matter at all? It doesn't matter at all, right? Like, it doesn't. Like, so what? Who cares, right? Any technology is gonna go. So Kubernetes is the thing today. Like, it won't be in 10 years, right? It might be in 5 years. It's not going to be in 10 years. I guarantee it. Something else will replace Kubernetes. Okay, so it's not the technology. So then what does that goal need to be that we've made our DevOps journey, right? Is it going to be that like we can operate with a certain level of staff? Well, that's not real empowering. Like, hey, there are 40 of you and I want to run my business with 10, right? So work hard and then 30 of you will go. That's not real empowering. Okay, that's not our goal. So like, you know, at the end of the day, our goal has to be to provide value to our customers, right? And that has to be our focus. And technology and efficiency and all that kind of can only ever serve that aim, right? That we want to provide value to our customers so that they're delighted by the product that we offer. And so all those other things will come and they will go, but they will always be in service of providing a great service to our customers that they enjoy. And we will never be good enough, right? The companies that we love are companies that are always improving, right? And they do good things and they do bad things. I mean, you saw Apple's event today, right? I mean, they did some good things today and they did some really dumb things today. But like, they'll keep iterating, right? Facebook does good things and bad things, and Google does good things and bad things. But they keep improving and evolving and growing, and that's what we love about those companies. And so that's always going to be our aim. There's never a destination.
So you talked a lot on the software quality and the standards that we are defining. So what is going to be the number one step in order to deliver a quality service and a quality software as a deliverable? Because I don't feel that we are just debugging for the sake of debugging. It's just my bread and butter that is there. I'm just doing that. But I wanted to understand like how to have in quality services, and because you have mentioned a lot of scientists in Lean who really pioneered the ways in which quality was supposed to be assessed and whatnot. Like, I just wanted to understand like how to deliver a quality deliverable product to the market, if not to an organization.
Yeah, an important thing there is starting with like what really is quality. It's an ambiguous term that we use in a lot of different ways. And when you really dig deep into it, fundamentally what quality is conformance to the desires of the customer. We think of quality meaning that like it's built really strong, it's solid, it doesn't feel cheap or chintzy. It does what we want to, it exceeds our expectations or something, right? Like, I mean, you know, AirPods are a great example of something that we tend to think is like, it's a pretty quality product. It feels good, good materials, and it does what it's supposed to do. It does it well, it does it better than we expect. And it's durable, it's gonna last. Because that's the thing, when we buy this thing, I spent a lot of money for it, I expect it to last a couple of years. I don't expect it to be junk in a couple of weeks. So all those things that we think of in terms of quality ultimately come down to, is the thing what I envisioned it to be, right? What I expected it to be? So when we apply that definition to our software, there's two different sides. There's the consumer and the producer, right? So from a consumer standpoint, we expect, you know, Facebook to work, right? Like to be available, to be up. We expect that it allows us to communicate with our friends efficiently, quickly, and easily. That anytime we want to carry out some action within the software, that it allows us to do that in a way that seems intuitive, right? That these are all the things that contribute to a quality end user experience. It's that it just sort of seems to work precisely the way you expect to, sort of naturally. And that's what we're looking for. When you take it over to the producer side, when you're on the other side of the fence, as developers, as operators, as people who are running the service, what do we need out of the software? Well, we need software that number one, communicates with us, tells us what it needs, right? So these are metrics, tracing, logging, right? These are the ways that we get data out of the service so that if it's not working well or it's broken or in some way, that we know, right? We all feel betrayed when our service isn't working properly and somebody else tells us. Like if you ever had somebody come by and be like, the thing's down, and your heart sinks because you're like, what do you mean it's down? I'm the one who's supposed to know first. And why are you telling me? It hurts. As developers, we want to know that we can make changes, we can improve the software in such a way that we don't actually degrade it, right? Otherwise, we're scared to touch the software, right? We've all been in a place where like somebody was like, hey, can you do that? You're like, I probably can do it. I don't want to. I don't want to do it at all because like I'm afraid I'm going to mess up and I'm going to break everything, right? And so a lot of the improvements that we've seen in the Agile community and the developer community and the DevOps community have actually been about kind of getting us to a place where we feel safer and more comfortable interacting with our software and feeling like the software is communicating with us and creating this feedback loop, right? It's this communication. Remember the original idea of doing releases every couple of minutes, right? Releasing in a continuous way was like ridiculous, right? Like you couldn't do that. You needed, every time you make a change and it impacts something else, you need to test all that stuff and make sure it works. And we found out that the trick there is you just have to get that loop down really tight. And when you're deploying changes every couple of minutes, every couple of hours, well, then your changes are really, really small, right? So the chance of breaking anything drops significantly, right? And we're like, oh, that's actually way better than testing the bejesus out of something, right? We just keep going all the time. But it took us a while to get to a point where we actually believed that that was a good thing, right? We were terrified people were going to break the thing. And so we came up with other mitigations. We came up with tests, right? And started putting tests in our software and different environments. And all of a sudden we went from a world where it was really expensive to have a dev test, Edge, whatever, these different developer environments. Well, cloud makes it significantly cheaper, right? So now actually we can have honest to goodness development environments. I remember not too long ago, and there's still environments today where if you're dealing with physical hardware, like it's just too expensive to have a development environment. You want one and nobody will give it to you because it's too expensive. And nobody wants to ask for the money for it. And if you do get the money goes somewhere else. So there's all these little things that we've allowed to sort of come together that have made our lives better. And so now I think we have a continuously improving high quality experience for both the end consumer perspective and the internal perspective, but there's still a long way to go. And all these things aren't uniformly deployed, right? Not everybody has development environments. Not everyone has all the tools that they need. There's never enough metrics in a system. Producing a lot of logs and a lot of data out of your software is great, but then you have to put it somewhere and then you have to do something with that, right? Now you need to do all this other automation because you just created this problem. Your software is giving you so much data, you can't do it. I mean, how many people have like logs where they're like, I wish I could sit down and write like a little program that would go through our logs and like collect this data, but like, I don't have time to do that, right? But I know that there's all these wonderful gems of information in there that I can make sense of if only I had the time to go through it, right? These days, it's even hard to store, logs for more than a couple of days. In some cases, a month or something like that, just because there's just so much data, right? So as technology keeps getting better, as cloud services make things cheaper and more distributed, as services reduce their cost, right? Like we're just going to keep getting better and better and better, but it's going to be a slow process and it's definitely not going to be uniform. So I think that's why ultimately, like in the DevOps community, it's kind of frustrating, right? Like you go to a conference and you hear these people talk on stage about like, we do this, we do this, we do this. And like, everyone's like, oh, I really wish I did that. That would be so awesome. And you start to feel like you're missing out. Like everyone else has got it together, but your team is all jacked up, right? Like you are a bunch of fools who have no idea what they're doing. Everyone else though, they've got it all figured out. That's never the case. And if you actually go up to a lot of these speakers at these events and you go and ask them like, is that how it works in your organization? Almost universally, they'll tell you, actually, no, it doesn't. It works like that way in like my little teeny tiny team. Or it's what we're trying to do and haven't succeeded yet. It's like, well, then what gives you the right to come here and tell us how to do it? And it used to really bother me, right, that people would do this because they're kind of lying to you, right? They make it seem like Shangri-La is already out there, and it turns out, no, it's not. But if you think about it, what's funny is and I found with a lot of these DevOps days, Velocity, different conferences over the years, is everyone else listens to that and they go back to their organizations and they're like, oh, we're stupid. Everyone else is doing it this way. We should do it. And you know what? They start doing it that way. And all of a sudden, like 2 years later, everyone does it that way. When the guy who went out and told you all to do it wasn't even doing it himself, you know? So at some point you kind of gotta like put the idea out there, let people eat it up, and then, let it take effect. And that's why it takes a little time for this stuff to sort of catch, and you see these sort of cycles. What we're talking about in 2014 is what people are actually doing in 2017. What we're talking about in 2017, 2018 is now what we're doing in, 2021. I mean, you think about Kubernetes, like, it's been out there for a while. Like, it's not new, but it was only around like 2019 that basically everyone gave up on anything else. And like now it's only Kubernetes. Even in 2018, people were using, Nomad, they were using Mesosphere, they were using all these other technologies, right? But 2019, it was like, finally, we all started to actually do what people were saying we should do in 2016, right? It takes a while for it to all catch up. And so, it can be frustrating, but it's also, it gives you a little peace if you can see that pattern,
Yeah, when I heard of Dave Hahn's theory on the Netflix has no DevOps at all. So now he's a person who was there in Apple, and I know probably there's going to be a revolutionary ops and the dev culture that might pop up, because in most of your talks you stress on people, because most of your talks it's all about A3 thinking, how to transform the culture of the people who are in that team and things like that. But I wanted to know, how are some of your best influences making sure that you take right decisions? Because you have pretty bunch of them, like Ono, Toyota, who not? Like you mentioned most of the philosophers from the world of TQM. Deming, I think probably John Willis appreciated you a lot because you did the DevOps transformation talk. So I wanted to know, how is your DevOps transformation, or as any organization DevOps transformation, taking today? Because there is no fact that this is going to be sustainable for a longer run, but everybody wants to have a transformation. So how to transform better, how to have a sustainable transformation, and what should be the definition of an ops according to an organization?
Continuous improvement is the heart of everything. That should be the foundation. It was the foundation ultimately of Lean. It's, I think, the foundation ultimately of DevOps. John Willis is one of my favorites because he's just got so much passion. He's got so much energy, right? He's like fun to talk to, and you can sort of feel his passion. We've got a lot of really smart people in the DevOps world that are out there talking and speaking, but I don't know how many are more exciting to listen to than John Willis. And so, especially a lot of the work he did in the early days, I feel like he was really helping push it. And there's been a lot of other great people out there. The work that he did with Damon was also incredible, but I digress. It comes back to continuous improvements. One of the reasons I was big on A3 is a way to be sort of pragmatic. It's a tool for how to actually be continuously improving. Because sometimes we hear this, like these terms like, continuous improve, and you're just like, yeah, I'm trying to get better every day, so I'm obviously continuously improving. Like, no, step back. What does continuous improvement really mean, right? It means that we're going to make lots of little changes that are going to lead to a big change over time, but we need to plan them out, right? Like, we need to have a general plan and a structure, and we need to have some logical thinking systems, right? A3 is a particularly great way of structuring a problem. And if you've seen my talk on that, the thing I try to emphasize about it is some people get caught up in it, like it's a form, it's this thing. But if you think about it, it's really just the scientific method applied to a business problem, right? I have some idea about the world and I'd like to change it. Okay, well, what does it look like right now? And what would I like it to look like in the future? Okay, if I can do that, most people, honestly, think about like a problem in your own personal life, right? Like how often can you say you actually know what you want, right? You're like, I want better, right? I want like, how much, how much money do you make right now? And how much money would you like to make in 10 years? Okay, now we can do the analysis on that. And you're like, no, I don't even want to put an amount. I just want more, right? Like maybe it could be 1 million. Maybe I want it to be as much as it can be, right? There are times where we legitimately actually don't want to limit ourselves. And so we don't actually want to say what we want because maybe we want better than that. We know as a human species, every time we improve something, we achieve things because we think that we can stand on top of the mountain and look down and be so proud of ourselves. Look what I've accomplished. I'm a genius. Look at me. But you notice the problem with human psyche is that every time we achieve these plateaus, there's this normalization effect, right? It's kind of like a weird version of the Dunning-Kruger effect, in that like before you knew how to program in Go or something like that, whatever. Like say you didn't know how to program Go, and you think I'm going to be super smart, I'm going to be super amazing because I'm going to learn Go, and then I will be better than all the people around me. And then you learn Go, and you're like, yes, I did it. And immediately you're like, oh, everyone knows Go. I'm not that special after all. Everyone has always known Go. It was just me. So then you figure out, I need to learn something else. Nobody else knows this thing. I'll go learn this thing, right? And you go, and you do this through your whole life. Every time you achieve something, it becomes normative. You now think everyone does that, right? We do this in our organizations too, right? We can't really set goals because every time we reach a goal, we now feel like it's always been that way, and we're thinking about the thing ahead. And so there's a certain amount of discipline that's necessary, and being really honest about where we're at, where we want to go, how we're going to get there, and then experimenting to get to that, and then thinking about, well, where does that set us up to go next, right? So that we're actually iterating along. If you just want to sort of get better, this is why most people who do continuous improvement never actually go anywhere, is they're just trying all the time to improve little things here and there. And so they just go in a circle.
Continuous is never continuous at all. It's like, it's just chunks and chunks and chunks. That's it.
It's just a circle. Like, I mean, like, let's automate all the things. Okay. By the time you've automated everything, you're going to be like, oh, this automation is crap. This isn't even really automated. Like, we need to do something different, right? So you'll do it all again. Like, there's no, start thinking like, how do we get to done? How do we get to good enough? And like I said, that's where you really have to have that North Star. What is it that we're actually trying to achieve, right? And if we have those basic benchmarks, which we call values, right? These are values. Again, values is a thing that we're just like, what are your values? I believe in being honest and integrity and well-being and whatever, right? It becomes these like weird moral things that float in the ether that mean nothing, right? As soon as we hear them, we're like, whatever, you don't do that, right? Maybe you try to, but you don't do that. So let's think about like, well, what are the core things that motivate us to do what we do? That's what a value actually is, right? It's the core directives. If you were a robot, these would be the core directives in your programming that would determine how you decide between two things, right? So I'm going to say, my values are to provide a great quality experience for my customer, to create an environment where people could do their best work, and where we're empowered to meet the needs of our customers, right? And that we're going to do it in such a way that we can all sleep well and be proud of the work that we do, right? If I even just make like, those are just my four values, just every decision that we make, are we going to replace the logging system? I don't know. Does it like make our customers happier? Does it make life easier for us? Do we enjoy the work that we're doing, right? And because if it does those things, then we should definitely replace the logging system. If it doesn't do those things, then why are we wasting our time, right? Same thing. Should we switch to Kubernetes? I don't know. Does it make our customers' experience better? Does it make us toil less? In a lot of cases, like, are you going to toil less in a company because you implemented Kubernetes? Fuck no. Normally, you're going to toil a hell of a lot more, right? It's going to break. You're not going to know why. You're going to be like, so cool, it's running Kubernetes, right? But are you going to sleep better at night because like it's better? Not at first, like eventually you will. Eventually you'll get to that point where you're just like, oh, I'm so glad we did that. It's like, it's got all these operators and it just fixes itself and it's beautiful, right? But initially, like, things just gonna break all the time, right? So like, should you do it? Maybe we, like based on those values, maybe we shouldn't do it. Or maybe we should think about how we can achieve that goal if we want to go and do this technology because we want to sleep well, right? We want to enjoy the work that we do. So, okay, so that kind of fulfills that one. But we got to do it without sacrificing our customers and without sacrificing, ourselves and our sanity. So let's figure out a way to make it sort of safer, right? Maybe we'll move some stuff over and we'll move this over there and we'll cut our teeth and we'll get a little bit better, right? But like I said, so long as we have like some values and we understand that it's a long journey and we just need to iterate, and we know what we're iterating towards, then we can do great things. That's the essence of DevOps right there. And you can call it DevOps. For us, it's called DevOps. In manufacturing, it was called Lean. For a while, it was called TQM, right? You had the whole Lean thing that was going on, and then it became like the TQM thing. And it's kind of like, it was like DevOps, and then it sort of became like SRE, right? It's like, is SRE different than DevOps or is it the same thing, right? They're the same problems with Lean. Because it wasn't even Lean for a long time, right? Like it was actually just like the Toyota production system. And then there's the quality movement, which became the total quality movement, which then like kind of like people got tired of hearing that because it got old. And then all of a sudden it was called Lean, but that was really just going back to anyway, like the terms are all dumb, right? But the idea was always the same, right? Like, let's build something better at higher quality that fulfills our customers' need, right? And that's all we're doing now. We're just doing it in our own way, in our own time with what we've got.
Yeah, Toyota Katha, the book written by Mike Rother, amazing masterpiece. I think it defined every little aspects without having any jargons of what we call in the DevOps, like, hey, we have observability here, hey, we have monitoring here. Everything was being covered there, and not just distributed tracing, whatnot. Everything was there. So I feel that chaos is one of the foundation for all these, because everybody saw a chaos in their industry and everybody wanted to improvise on the current process and the current improvements that they can bring in. So I think this is going to be a very chaotic filled question, because what can chaos teach to the DevOps culture? Because a lot of times it's all about like, you might be doing something like, hey, it's minting money, but sometimes it might just go down. So what is the learning that happens when there's a chaos in the DevOps culture? Not just DevOps culture, in the organization's deployed product or the process.
Well, let me ask you, do you separate the ideas of chaos and entropy, or the chaos and entropy the same thing?
Chaos and entropy separated.
Okay, so how would you differentiate the two?
So chaos probably is one which I don't feel right now, because it's just working right now. So I need not have to touch it. But entropy is something like, okay, let's just try breaking off things, or else let's just go on and try to break things, or else something like Chaos Monkey, which Netflix did. It's all about that I just define it together.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. Because I think when we talk about it, there's fundamentally two things. There's order and disorder. And I think a lot of times when we talk about chaos, what we're thinking of, like, especially in the context of like Chaos Monkey or something like that, we're talking about the fact that systems have a tendency to break and act in unpredictable ways. And it seems to happen at random, but it also seems to hate you personally. So like, it only happens. In fact, if you ever read The Goal, the guy who wrote the Goal, Ellie Goldratt, Dr. Goldratt, used to have a joke that he would say, it's just like, what is the probability of the bread landing butter side down? He said, you'd want to say that it's 50-50, but it's really not. The truth is that the probability of it landing butter side down is inversely proportionate to the price of the carpet, right? This idea that like, it seems like everything's got it out for you, right? Personally, like our things want to break. So there is this force, like we give disorder and entropy a personality, and we turn it into this force of chaos that's going to come and it's going to eat us and it's going to destroy everything. And I think the idea of embracing that through ideas like fault injection, chaos monkey, right, does do the right thing. It forces us to build what we always knew we should have built, which is resilient systems, right? You should never, like, you build a database and it's a single database on a single host. That's dumb. Like, you don't need anyone to tell you that's dumb. You never should have done that. Why would you do that? That's your data. It's important, right? Like, if it's not important, why the fuck are you putting it in a database? Like, data is important. So why would you put it on one host? Like, the drive could die, the host could die, whatever. And like, I don't know, are you setting offsite backups? Is it redundant? Who knows? So why does anyone ever build any of this crap? Why does anyone build a system that's not resilient? Because it's hard, right? Because it takes time and energy, and you end up at some point saying like, well, if all I did was databases all day long, then I would build a really strong database. But I'm not. I do a whole bunch of things, and I just need to get this database stood up so I can go do this thing. And most of the time it works just fine, right? So it's only when we actually have something that goes and breaks that shit, like on a regular basis, that we actually know that like we're going to do that. And what this comes down to is relative weights, right? Just like electricity or water or anything else, like we will generally take the path of least resistance to get to where we want to go, right? We want to get there as quickly and as easily as possible. And it's not because you're lazy, it's just because like this is just how physics works, and that's how our brains work too. If you know something's going to break on Tuesday, you will be motivated intrinsically to build a better, more resilient thing today, because you're going to have to go and like fix it. And it may be worse when you have to fix it than when you just build it in the first place. So now you're motivated to go and do the right thing. Without that, you could just stand up that database on that one host in the corner, and you know what? It's probably going to be fine. It's probably not going to crash. In fact, it'll probably run fine for like 2 years. And by the time it does break, nobody will care what it is. So why should I bother? I'll just stand it up and run it, right? So I think this idea of changing the weight so that we don't get to be lazy, that we're kind of causing ourselves to go do the right hard thing and building more resilient, more organized systems. We motivate ourselves by having these forms of ordered chaos going out and doing all the things that force us to build the right thing in the first place, right?
That's true. That's true. I think you covered pretty much everything that was required. And yeah, thank you so much. But before going to end this podcast, I want to ask you some of the influential books that you ever read, because I know that you have been reading a lot of books over the course of time. So any list of books that you would love all of us to read?
Business books? You should
I
read
know
Russian
that
literature.
operation management. Yes, I still remember that.
Well, okay, I'll give you a couple of different areas. Let's see. Grab those. And grab, yeah, you already mentioned that one. And oh, there's team topologies right there. There's Deming. Where's my Eckhoff? Yeah, there we go, right there. Oh, and everything's falling down. Okay. So, it won't matter to most people, but yeah, operations management. This is the book that kind of really like kicked me into high gear. When I came across this textbook, this is the exact one actually. I came across this I was thinking about like how to build a better organization. I was thinking a lot about this stuff at work, and I was actually walking my baby, and I saw a box full of books, and this was in it, and I was like, operations management. I do operations. That seems weird. And I pulled it out and started flipping through it, and of course, it has to do with manufacturing and construction and things like that. But I was just like, these look like exactly like my kinds of problems, except like in their context instead of mine. And I was just like, what? Somebody already figured this out. It's like there have been people before me. So that, spending a little time in something like this, I think is helpful. If you're on the operations side of the house, if you're an engineer, you probably won't give a shit. One of the fundamental tenets of Deming and the system of profound knowledge is psychology. It's an understanding of psychology. Science not really appreciated. And there's a lot of great books out there. Some ones that I've really enjoyed recently was Maslow's book, Towards the Psychology of Being, is a really great book that gives you a lot of insight into Maslow's hierarchy. You know, we talk about Maslow's hierarchy and we just make it this quick little pithy thing. It's a lot more intricate and a lot more human than most of us are led to believe. So go read Maslow himself. That was a good one. In the same vein, Alfred Adler wrote some great things. This is my favorite of his, which is What Life Should Mean to You. Sort of a nice bridge, I think, between Maslow, Jung, and Freud. Like, I really enjoyed Adler. If you just read pithy statements about Adler, I think you can be led to have some strange conclusions about him. It was like, you know, oh, he was obsessed with power, this and that. But I think it's a very sensitive book. I think it's really good, and Adler is definitely worth a read. And the last one, and probably most important, and I don't have a dust jacket on this one, but this is Recreating the Corporation by Russell Ackoff. Dr. Russell Ackoff was a student of Deming, and they kind of grew up together at Bell Labs and the Census Bureau and a number of other things. He doesn't get as much attention as Deming did, but he was his greatest disciple, right? And he did a lot of great work, and each of his books just got better and better and better. But this one is, I think, a good summation sort of his work and causes you to just think in a totally different way. So anyway, I really have a soft spot in my heart for Russell Ackoff, his contributions to systems thinking and the way that he applied it, you know, before he died in the 21st century. So I don't know, those would be some that are kind of, I think, super important reads.
I think perfect. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for giving me this podcast. It's a lot. I think a lot of insights were given by you, and it's going to help me in the future. Chaos engineering or SRE or else anything. It's just going to be my masterpiece for a very long time. And thank you so much for being with this podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.